ladies. It's been a busy couple of months, and of course, we are shifting seasons from summer, the last time I gave you one of these love notes, to now when it is mid October and the weather, while seasonably warmer than usual, is still definitely on the cooler side. So, layers are becoming a lot more relevant. These naturally dyed clothes are adorably relevant. These are some goldenrod dyed overalls and a black knight scabiosa dyed Ogden that I have made recently. And I also made this dead stock plaid Ogden. I got this dead stock a while ago, I think a couple of years ago at a Winnipeg Sews fabric swap. And there was just less than a meter of it from what I recall. And it's probably cotton. Not totally sure. I didn't never bothered with a burn test for it. But I'm slightly annoyed that it took me so long because, as you can see, it is the perfect plaid for my autumn wardrobe in particular. And then yeah, I made that Black Knight Scabiosa Ogden as well. And these overalls are they started off as a neutral pair that are the same as a black pair that I bought up at Poor Michael's Emporium when I was up around Riding Mountain for my residency earlier this summer. And I love them. One thing that I would like to remind any of you who decide to pop clothes into your dye pots is that the cooking involved most of the time in dyeing, which I definitely did with this goldenrod, will shrink your clothes down a bit. It's sort of like washing it in hot water a bunch. So as you can see here, layered with my Black Knight Scabiosa Ogden and also my Wolf's Teeth sweater, which finally came out. The pattern's available on the website now. But you can see that the overalls are a little tight around the hips and also around my belly a little bit. And that is not the case with the black ones. And that is just because the dyeing of them basically was like washing them a whole bunch of times in a hot water cycle. And so it does shrink up the fabric. This is a cotton fabric and it's super comfy, but they are a little bit on the tight side. And I don't know if I were to wear them, whether they'd loosen with wear. But yeah, I actually have in the preparations for this seasonal shift been pulling out my papers from my Me Made wardrobe and using the color palette. I didn't actually use these scraps. I used some other scraps of fabric that I grabbed. But I am planning out what the hell I'm going to be wearing. And so I've been using my Me Made wardrobe mini course workbook and its worksheets to plan out a bunch of makes. And I don't know how many of them I'm going to get around to, but the shifting that I've been doing in terms of the work that I've been doing, combined with how worn a lot of my clothes are these days, is kind of making me look at what gaps to fill. And so it's been really helpful actually to be using my worksheets to kind of plan that out and have a little bit more of an idea of what the hell it is that I want to be doing. And my needles have actually been pretty busy, even though I've been so busy. And a lot of that is because I've been staring at my computer so much and or sitting on airplanes. And so I've been able to get a decent amount of knitting done. So tucking into my overall pockets here is a pair of the Fool socks, which are from the first iteration of the Major Arcana socks. And I cast them on after I finished off those strength socks that had been on my needles for a while. And I still have the shawl on the go that is for this year's Advent calendar. There's a couple of Advent calendars still available for pre-order. But I am still working on that one. I'm just figuring out the border of it. So here are the Fool socks instead. And I've been knitting with this absolutely delicious 80% Canadian mohair from a farmer that I met in Quebec when I was at Twist. And she blends it with 20% wool from her sheep. And it's the most delicious sock yarn. So yeah, that's my needles have been on the go, mostly in an in between process more so than anything else. And I'm still able to wear warm layers, which is kind of nice. Dye pots wise, it is hardcore harvest season. So you can see here that the Hopi Red Dye Amaranth has really been on the go. They got gigantic this year, and that is all thanks to my veggie pods, because we had a pretty dry year otherwise. And I got really good harvests, especially out of the veggie pods. And so it's been really, really busy harvest season around here, just generally. And that has been great and also exhausting because it can't wait. And so all of the other deadlines that I've had on the go over the last little while, which have been pretty significant deadlines, they don't adjust. And neither does harvest season. If you don't pick and the frost comes, you lose an entire harvest. Or, if you don't deal with your harvest when it's ready, then you are screwed a little bit. Things go moldy, or there's so many ways that trying to beat Mama Nature just really doesn't work. And it's just made really obvious during harvest season. So I've been harvesting seeds, I've been harvesting dyes. I've been prepping my garden beds, and I'm starting to work with my dye pots for the season, prepping my journals with what dyes I know I'm going to be able to use. But I'm also waiting because my friend Laura is going to be doing a collab with me with her sock yarn again. So there will be more sock yarn dyed with our homegrown dyes at some point later this season, which is exciting. The other really major thing that I've been working on lately is I ice dyed this stunning gown. And the gown that you can see me stitching onto here is made out of a dead stock silk that I got from Blackbird Fabrics when they did a wedding fabric drop. And they had this stunning silk that had some runs in it somewhere. I haven't found any. And so I decided to sew this giant gown. And I used ice dyeing techniques that I learned from Cara Marie Piazza earlier this year. And so that color is even more green in real life, but this is pretty good at representing it. And so that is from frozen European buckthorn berries and Black Knight Scabiosa flowers and a couple of marigold flowers, and then some used dye pots of Black Knight Scabiosa and iron ice cubes turned into ice cubes, and then also Tango Cosmos Bath turned into ice cubes. And I did, believe it or not, a dry dye on the silk where I did not wet the fabric ahead of time, but the silk obviously takes it really, really well. And then I used the exact same stuff on this cotton lace here, and I wet the cotton lace thoroughly after, of course, prepping it. Both the silk and the cotton lace were prepped properly. But you can see that the lace didn't take the dye nearly in the same way as the silk did, which is normal, but also just always fascinating for me. And so I've been really enjoying playing with these other ways of working with dyes than my usual, and also with working with fibers other than the wool yarns that I use, the non-superwash wool yarns that I am normally working with in my dye pots. And you might be thinking, oh, this is an interesting choice here, especially since you can't see the rest of the skirt. I actually decided to not put the lace there. It felt too heavy for how light the rest of the fabric is. But I do plan on making some other pieces using kind of similar techniques and with different dyes that have been frozen and or their dye pots have been used up and then frozen. And I'm excited to kind of see what else I get as far as color schemes. I have about the same amount of fabric as was used for this gown. So there's about 5 meters that is still available, which is exciting. So I'm going to make another outfit and use some marigolds and Black Knight Scabiosa again, but without the iron and with citric acid instead. And so just have a very different color palette on the go. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see how that kind of turns out. But it's been a lot of fun to be working with my dyes in a different way than I normally do. And that is because I have been spending a lot of time working on this installation that is hopefully going to be in the world at some point next year. There's still a lot of work to do on it, but this felt like kind of a big piece that I wanted to get made so that I could be getting it ready for grant writing, which has been a huge amount of my time recently. So my dye pots over the last little bit were doing a little bit of wholesale work and then a lot of kind of filling in these gaps as I was getting ready for grant applications and a first little showing that I ended up doing at Manitoba Fiber Fest that I knew I had on my timeline. And I am looking forward to getting back to doing kind of mini tests with my dye pots in the next little while. But yeah, the last couple of months have been absolutely crazy, which is why I have not had, last month we didn't have a New Moon Love Note. This was my showing at Fiber Fest, Manitoba Fiber Fest, my booth this year. Half was Sanctuary and half was our local color palette. And with our local color palette, I wanted to show a little capsule wardrobe. Hilariously, but also understandably, a bunch of people thought that the clothes were for sale. And I was like, nope, they are not. I am just showing you all the weird things that we can do with our local plants, including making fun little masks. It feels very apropos considering the time of year. And then I went to Knit City. I was in Vancouver for a whirlwind of a trip, shared a booth with Hinterland and San Juan Woolworks. And we had a lot of fun. I had my cute little corner you can see there on the left. And it was really nice to be able to connect with friends on the West Coast again. Even though it was a very short trip, it's always nice to be able to talk to folks and connect with folks. And then I came home and did the book launch party for Sanctuary at Wolseley Wool. And we've got a little pop-up shop going there for the month of October. And I'm kind of thinking, depending on how well it goes, if it might just stay semi-permanently, because it's nice to have the yarn out of the house and visible for folks. But yeah, then, tucked in between all of these like really huge events is me sitting in the night stitching by hand the zipper onto this gown that is like might seem so out of place, but a big part of the work that I do and any, textile artist is going to know and understand, it takes so many hours to make the things that we make that when you're working on larger scale projects, you have to backtrack your to-do list and your timelines by months and months and sometimes years. And so I knew that I was going to have grant applications and then also having my booth at Fiberfest ready for early September, and then these grant applications that went in last month. And also knowing that within that time frame, I was going to be doing the book launch party and I was going to be away in Vancouver. And there were all of these huge projects that there was no quick way around. And there was no way to be like, well, I'm not going to be in Vancouver for this number of days and therefore away from my sewing machine. And I'm not going to drag a silk gown with me on an airplane. Like, that's ridiculous. And so if that is ridiculous, it means that you have to figure out when do you fit that time in. And so there have been a lot of late nights over the last little while. And I'm still slowly coming out of it. I'm in the middle of the website rebuild right now. And there's probably another solid week of staring at my computer and copy and pasting things over and making sure that the new everything works better than the current website. I'm really excited to unveil it, but it won't be ready by the time probably a bunch of you watch this. And then by the time that we have our next New Moon Love Note, it will be available to check out. But it's been a lot of like really big projects that under like in a normal person's world and under normal circumstances, each thing would take like 6 months to focus on. You devote a very dedicated period of time to writing big grant applications, and you would, spend a focused period, like a whole quarter prepping for and getting around to different shows, and that would be the only thing that you're focusing on that quarter. And a book launch would get its own dedicated focused month of time at least. And never mind this giant installation that I'm working on that is a year's worth of work still ahead of me, if I don't need a break. It's been a lot, and I love it. Obviously, it's what I do and why I do it. And also, I know it's not the most sustainable way of working. And so, honestly, a lot of this really focused work has been in order to set up future years where I'm not needing to work like this, because it's not that sustainable. And it would be nice to have, not 10 hours of staring at my computer, because last week I was spending that many hours, sewing this gown together in order to then spend 10 hours staring at the computer in order to write the grant applications and then, make the video content that will go on the social media and then rebuild the website from scratch. Although, like I said, I'm really excited about the new website. But yeah, it's a lot, and in a short period of time. And in the last 6 months, it's been kind of going like that, where I'm doing really big projects that all deserve a lot more focus and dedication. And instead, I'm kind of bouncing around from one to the other with maybe a week in between. And it doesn't feel necessarily the most fair to each of the projects. But I think, I've done all of them well. It's just, it would be nice to have time to celebrate each of them. So I'm actually really looking forward to this Samhain season and things getting a little bit quieter for a couple of months, and being able to focus a little bit more for the next couple of months. There are some holiday markets coming up, and I'm going to be teaching over the fall, but I also am kind of crossing my fingers and toes that the grant applications will come back with great results that will give me a little bit more breathing room. It's a hard economy, and the world is the world. And running a small business has felt more exhausting than it did during the COVID lockdowns, if I'm being totally honest. But I'm still having fun, and I'm still, despite the furrow in my brow in this video, which I feel like is actually a pretty common face that I've been making these days. It's not necessarily that I am like upset about the work that I'm doing. It's more just that I'm focused on it. And when I'm able to focus on one thing, I give it all of my attention. It's just that then, the next day or the next week, I'm jumping to something else and giving it all of my attention and trying to do that, knowing that there are so many, or recently there have been so many deadlines and things with set timeframes that I've had to kind of give that push through. But I'm looking forward to having a little bit more of a breather and being able to be a little bit more creative maybe in what I do, including making more of these weird fucking masks. I've been making these. They're part of the installation, and I promise that all of this will make a lot more sense once the installation is far enough along to kind of put it into context. I'm really excited about the direction that it's going, and I'm really hoping that we get those grants so that I can just really like focus and spend some dedicated time only working on these, because I think it'll be more exciting to see it a little bit more consistently rather than these like weird little bits and bobs that, you're getting to see on social media and in these videos. I know I've been talking about it for a number of months, but it probably at this point feels a little amorphous, which makes sense because it's still early enough in the creation process. But I've been having a lot of fun and getting really distracted, honestly, with the ways that I've been playing with our local dyes, and making the things for this installation and getting more ideas as I make each new thing and get inspired by it, and think of ways to push it further, and which of course means making even more things because that's how we go. But like this mask is the latest or one of the latest ones that I've been making recently, and it's woad seeds, but they look like feathers, and so making the mask took ages because, as you can see, placing each woad seed was its own little process, but the end result is really, really stunning, and it's honestly why I keep doing everything that I'm doing, because I can't not do it. The idea of just not making these things that I feel so pulled to make, it doesn't really feel like an option right now. And so I'm just kind of going with my bones and trusting that it's leading me in the right direction. That's the very first mask, the Dyer's Chamomile one. And then making these little pigments that are little remnants of dye pots also feels really fun. And the mini world, if anything is going to give you a bit of an idea of what this plant world is that I want to make, this is the best way to show you, is in this teeny tiny coven version of one part of the installation, where we have this whole little micro world that has been entirely made with local dye plants and things made from those dye plants, whether it's paper, whether it's textiles, a basket, these curtains made with plants. I don't know, there's just like so much to do. And every once in a while I get these moments of brevity, like when I went to Granville Island. I had, an afternoon after Knit City was done and I had shipped things home before I then had to fly home. And I get these lovely moments of being able to like sit by a body of water and just watch the weather and eat some really delicious food. And I'm really grateful for living a life where this is what I get to do, and I get to decide, what's a priority for me and what's not, and how do I make it work. And being such a seasonal creature in the period of a very seasonal time of year, it feels exciting to get these moments of rest. Weirdly, it's like a little, opposite. But, when it's juxtaposed against this, where I got a 2-foot branch of sea buckthorn from a neighbor and then proceeded to spend 7 hours harvesting the leaves and then also the berries, and splitting the berries between what were, edible, good, like ripe berries, and then the ones that were mushy and overripe and are going to be a dye pot experiment. Like, this is kind of my ideal situation, is even though it's like tedious and, maybe what capitalism is like, this is not the most useful way for you to spend your time. For me, I would rather spend the time sitting and methodically picking pieces off of, a thorny branch, step by step and leaf by leaf, and staining my fingers. And, I have never used sea buckthorn in a dye pot before. I know based on the results that I got from the European buckthorn last year that I'm really excited to see what I get from it. And it was also my first time getting to cook with buckthorn before sea buckthorn. I made jam with these berries and it's delicious. And I have a bunch more berries that are now in my freezer. But, there's only so much that you can fight against what your bones are calling you to and what Mama Nature is calling you to. I'm really grateful to live in such a seasonal climate. I can't imagine living somewhere where the seasons weren't as extreme as ours are, because it feels like it really helps to, even though it makes me feel like I'm constantly on my toes and never quite having enough time to adjust to a season, it also gives me the opportunity to remember that change is normal and change is constant, and that we need to stay aware of our environment around us and responsive to our environment. And that whatever capitalism or whatever society is telling us is the most important thing to focus on is not necessarily, like, yeah, there's deadlines for grant applications and I'll get those done. And also I need to make sure that I've made my harvests for the winter. And I need to make sure that I've tidied up my garden beds and prepped them for the winter, and that everything is going to be ready for the coming seasons, and that the work that can wait, and the work that can't wait, either because there's a deadline that literally says you have to have it done by now, and if not, oh well, or alternatively that my bones are just pulling me to, with no real letting go. I have to trust those instincts and follow them. And so I'm really grateful to have built a life for myself that allows me to do that. It can be a little maddening at times, I'm not going to lie. As you can tell from the fact that, last month we didn't have a New Moon Love Note. We did have the video from my residency, and so that kind of took its place, but it's just a really busy time of year, and I feel like I manage to forget that every year, that when harvesting comes, it is a massively important time of year. Like, I have to harvest my medicines before they go to compost if I miss them. And I have to get the house ready for the winter, because there's going to be a point where the snow comes and I don't have the option of washing the windows anymore. And I have to grab garlic from my dad and, prep all of these things, because also I can't just have stuff piled up in my house. I mean, I could, but it'll be just pure chaos. And those things have to happen, and everything else can kind of get structured around that, and it'll be okay. There's obviously a lot of privilege in being able to say all of those things, but there's also just the realities that, there are things that we have within our control, and then there's a lot of things that we don't have within our control. And so the stuff that's within our control, then we can kind of listen to that and do what we can within that. And then the rest of it, we just have to kind of let go of, and also build in some buffer time. I did not anticipate that unpicking this thing. This is one piece of the 2-foot branch. The 2-foot branch took 7 hours to unpick and to harvest everything. So, building in that buffer time is kind of key. And, doing bits and drafts where possible helps. A lot of why I was able to get my grant applications done in time was because I had drafted good chunks of them. And so then it was just a matter of editing things down. And we're heading into eclipse season, so editing feels like an appropriate theme. Anyway, the garden beds are going to bed, and maybe I'll have something more cohesive for you next month.